Okay. Ah, good morning. How are we all doing today? Fair? I think a fair number of people are out sick too, based on the emails I've gotten today. Oh, your display is still messed up. I forgot to tell the tech about that one. Well, I mean, at least. I mean, really, yeah, we need that one requires more than just like messing with the plugs. I should have told the tech when the tech was just here, but oh well. Yeah. Technology issues and everyone apparently getting sick over spring break aside, how are we doing? Fine, so-so.
Because I got sick over spring break too, but I also had a night term yesterday.
Did it go well?
No,
Oh, I'm sorry. What class?
probability and statistics.
Is that like Math 32?
Yeah, that's really Sorry?
Is that Math 32?
Yeah.
Sort of the math intense version of stats,
I
right?
mean, it would have been fine. I just messed up on the math. So I lost.
You messed up on the math in your math class?
Yeah. No, because I messed up on part B, which is the reporting for part C, part D, and part E.
Oh, and
that's half the points.
okay.
Yeah.
So when I taught math 17 zillion years ago, we always designed the problems like that so that, and did grading so that, okay, like you mess up on part 2, and that means you're getting, in a strict sense, the wrong answer for like 3, 4, and 5. But you can still get credit for those if like you're doing the work correctly. Was it like that or no?
I don't know. I mean, our professor does that.
Oh,
I think they have to do this question. Well, we're screwed. I had her class last year.
so they do it where like, oh, you made the mistake in part 2, so you don't get any credit for the whole thing. Ah, that's really unfortunate. Yeah, I was fortunate when I was in math grad school that I TA'd for this really fantastic math professor who specialized in like math education and math pedagogy. So I got to learn some like really cutting edge 17 zillion years ago stuff about like how to sort of address things like math anxiety and structure things so that students can be successful. It's too bad your professor isn't doing that. But okay, I am on tape, so I should probably stop with dissing my colleagues in the applied math department. Yeah, so a reminder that Philosophy is organizing this event on the ethics of AI in education tomorrow, including a panelist from applied math. Hopefully that's not the professor you're talking about. Very excited about this. Starts at 3 tomorrow in not the super big lecture hall in Cobb 1, but like one of the big ones just off to the side. I need to remember to put one of the flyers on the door. Okay, good. So next, on Tuesday, I kind of gave a little bit of an overview of what the schedule looks like for the rest of the semester. It's a fair amount of work you'll need to be kind of doing continuously. A lot with the argument analyses. Today, I wanted to do a quick overview of how to pass the class and then how to get an A in the class. As a reminder, I basically only give 2 grades. You either get a B in the class, which is the lowest passing grade I give, or you get an A in the class. To pass a class with a B, you need to do all the stuff on the left. I think basically everyone has done all of the stuff from Unit 1 and has gotten credit for the difficult conversation assignment. The first argument analysis assignment for argument by example, that is due tomorrow at 6 p.m. I think one person turned theirs in already, did a really nice job on it. It's making me optimistic that this will go well for everybody. But I set the deadline for this Friday with the idea that if you needed a second pass to make some revisions, you would have a little bit of time before, for example, working on the argument analysis for our current unit on expertise. Beyond that, you'll need to do some slightly different things related to the next unit, which is a method for sort of checking information sources. 2 additional argument analyses, your choice, whether it's like 2 arguments from example, 2 arguments from expertise, or 1 of each. I believe those details are up on CAT courses for that one if you wanted to get started right away. And stuff about the paper that's actually mostly going to happen in class or sort of during finals week. But details to be determined on that. That's all happening in the last couple weeks. Don't worry about the paper. It's not like a full-blown research paper thing. So you need to do all of those things to pass the class with a B. If you want to get an A, you need to do all the stuff on the left, plus also a second difficult conversation assignment. You choose your own partner for this one. And your partner can be anyone. That can include people outside of this class. So if you want to do this with a family member, that's cool. If you want to do it with your roommate who hasn't taken this class, or your best friend back home who doesn't even go here, all of that is great. They obviously aren't going to be set up to like do the argument map and stuff like that. But you can explain to them the structure of you have this initial conversation where you exchange your arguments, and then you go away and you think about it and you come back and exchange objections and so on. In all other respects, this is the same as difficult conversation number 1. So looking for the same sort of reflection that you're going to turn in at the end. You also need to do 2 additional argument analyses. So that is 2, 4, 6 of these. That's going to be roughly 1 a week for the remainder of the semester if you want to get an A. So there's a chance if next week I'm going to ask like how time intensive are these argument analyses because they're a new format. If it turns out that like these actually take a lot of time, I might bump these requirements down a little bit. But for now, if you're going for an A, you're going to be wanting to do one of these argument analyses roughly once a week. And those assignments should also be available on CAT courses right now. Okay. Any questions on how you pass a class with a B or how you get an A in the class? Okay. So last time we started talking about argument by example. Looked a little bit, let's see, we had a conversation about critical thinking and what exactly that means. And then we got into good practices with citations or giving or identifying the sources when you make an argument, an appeal to authority or an appeal to expertise. At the end of class, we'd started looking at these 2 examples, 2 news stories, one from CNN, humans were using tobacco at least 12,000 years ago. The other from, I think it was the New York Times, this parasite turns plants into zombies. I asked you to go through these, see if they give names of particular authorities or experts, titles and affiliations that can help you figure out whether they're informed and trustworthy. We're not worrying yet about how exactly you do that. It's just, can you identify these people? A quote or link to particular claims that they make, with the idea being this would allow us to check, does it represent what they're saying accurately? And then overall, how good are the citations in these 2 news pieces? So I believe every group had pretty much finished this, including group 9, who had some technical issues. I think every group had pretty much finished this when we broke last time. So let's take 2 or 3 minutes right now. You can refresh yourselves on what you said about these 2 stories last time, and then we'll kind of collect and discuss as a whole class. Sound good? Any questions? Okay. Do you want me to give you control of your screens? Or to me, it kind of feels like if we're just doing a quick refresh, just look on your own laptops. Okay, so we'll go 2 or 3 minutes. You can refresh yourselves on these 2 stories, and then we'll come together and discuss as a class. Does the lull mean we're good to go? We're an epsilon more awake, ready to talk about these? Okay. So what did you say for the first one? Humans were using tobacco at least 12,000 years ago. And start at the top. Names of particular authorities or experts? Devin. Yeah, good. That actually covers all the things, so I'm just going to go to this slide. So they do identify a particular authority or an expert named Darren Duke. Over here in the story, it's right here. I think this is like I guess it's technically the 5th paragraph, but they do like super short journalist paragraphs. In the exact same sentence where they name Darren Duke, they give their title and affiliation, principal and COO, I'm guessing Chief Operating Officer at Far Western Anthropological Research Group. And then in terms of references to particular claims they make, at least the headline claim here is paraphrased. It's not a direct quotation. I think there are a couple of direct quotations elsewhere in here, like this down at the very end. But in terms of the overall claim, it's paraphrased. Primary evidence is tobacco seeds. They do identify that. We get a oddly formatted photo. But like Devin was saying, we're not given a citation. We're not given a link. If you read carefully, they do say that the study was published a few days earlier than the news story in the journal Nature Human Behavior. So you can go, and it's not super difficult, to find the website for the journal Nature Human Behavior. The search box is way down here for some reason. And then you can type in, say, tobacco and Duke. And there's a journal article here that was published in October of 2021. And you compare that to This news story was published in October of 2021. So it seems like you can find the article, but that's way less convenient and also way less reliable than having a proper citation or a link directly to the story. So overall, what did you say in terms of how good this citation was? No one has opinions. Sahana.
It's okay at
Mhm.
best.
Yeah, it's okay. Like, you can find the research article that lies behind this. You've got the name of the person. You've got some idea of who they are and what they do. It's not just complete. It's not like the Blue Sky posts I was showing on Tuesday, where like there's no reference whatsoever, but it's not great. Okay, then how about the other one? Why is this blocked? That's weird. How about the New York Times piece? Looking for names, affiliations, references, or links. Oakley.
Well, they mentioned Saskia Bogenhau as being a scientist at the John Ingalls Center in England, as well as providing a link for Aster Yellow's Cyberpunk.
Good. So we're given the name of a particular authority or expert, and I didn't look at this one 5 minutes ago, so I don't remember exactly where their name shows up. We're given their affiliation, the place where they work, and some information about what that place does that seems relevant in a story about sort of plant science. And where was it? Right here. So what is this? 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph. We're given a link to a paper published in September in the journal Cell. And you can read this whole thing if you wanted to. Now, you probably wouldn't want to, right? This is super technical biology. I do not understand the vast majority of what's going on in this paper. I know a little bit about a lot of things. I don't know enough to read this paper. Is that a problem? Or to frame the question more rhetorically, why is it good that they included a link to the study if the vast majority of people who read the New York Times article cannot understand the study? So think about that. Almost everyone who reads the New York Times story will not be able to understand the research article in the journal Cell. It's just too technical. Why is it still good that the New York Times included the link to the research article? I want everybody to think about that for 30 seconds. Yeah, and once you think you have an answer, check in with your table. We'll go 30 more seconds. It's really hot today. Oh, apparently you only needed 15 more seconds. Okay, so why is it good that the New York Times included a link to this research article that is way too technical for the vast majority of readers of the New York Times to understand? Like, if you have the background in biology to understand this journal article, you are probably not reading the New York Times story. You're just reading, you're finding out about this through the research paper. Yeah, Freddie.
I mean, I would just say it's like the level of trust,
Okay.
because like if you see citations, at least you can be
Mhm.
I hope at least that the citations are relevant and meaningful
Mm-hmm.
for the average reader, that is, because I don't think anyone's going to check all the citations on a news article or Wikipedia or any of those things.
Yeah, good. So it's not about, I don't know, maybe there is somebody in this room who knows enough biology to be able to read this paper. I'm going to assume that's not the case. Okay, so if you're the exception, I apologize. This is not about letting us fact check the article. This is about saying, if an expert reads the New York Times story, that expert can fact check the article very easily. And so it's not about I individually can go and read this paper and see, did the New York Times report it accurately? It's, okay, if I have concerns about this, I could go to one of my friends in ecology and ask them to read this and interpret it for me, and ask them, was this reported accurately? Now, I'm a professor in a university. I have friends who are molecular biologists. But even if you don't have that direct access to someone who could do that fact checking, the fact that the New York Times has this link there means that some experts out there could go and do fact checking if people thought that there was an issue to be concerned about. Does that make sense? So we want to see links or more academic style citations, not necessarily because it lets us do fact checking individually, but because it creates the possibility for the whole network of people we depend on epistemically to do fact checking of the story. Any final questions or comments on that point? Okay. Good. So that's rule 1. Identify your sources, name, affiliation, and ideally a direct quote. And if not that, then an easy to follow citation or link to a direct, that can count as a direct quote. Okay, that's rule 1. Rule 2, expertise must be relevant. So consider the following people. Myself, Professor Dan Hicks, a philosopher and social scientist. Anthony Fauci, an immunologist and COVID-19 policymaker. Dolores Huerta, a labor leader and activist. Joe Rogan, podcaster and influencer. The oldest member of your family, the youngest member of your family, and you. So this whole list of people. Question to discuss at your table: which of these people are experts? And then a follow-up question: why is the first question a trick question? So look over the list, talk at your tables. Which of these people are experts? And then after a few minutes of that, turn to the question, why is that a trick question? I'm going to give you all at least 5 minutes to discuss this because there's a bunch of names to work through. So I will go ahead and turn the music back on. I'm a little rough. My sleep disorder Okay. Who are the experts on this list?
It depends on context.
Okay.
I wouldn't go to Anthony Fauci for advice on how to run a podcast, and I wouldn't go to Joe Rogan for advice on how to run a country's response to a pandemic. And, you know, the youngest member of your family is probably pretty good at getting what they want from your parents.
Yeah, okay, good. So Anthony Fauci, not an expert in how to run a podcast. Joe Rogan, expert in how to run a podcast? Or be a mega influencer. I was talking with Freddie, like how to get 10 million people to listen to what you have to say. That's really hard. But not, we don't want to listen to Joe Rogan in how to respond to a global pandemic. About some of the other folks on the list. Let's see, we haven't filled in a box for the expert in box for Anthony Fauci. What is Anthony Fauci an expert in? Ish?
Running government medicine, or running like government medical.
Yeah. Running a government health research agency. So Anthony Fauci was head of the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases. I think that's right. NIAID, something like that. He was head of that for like decades. So he probably has a great deal of expertise in how to run a health research agency. He also has his degree is in immunology specifically. So we can assume that he has expertise in that area as well. How about Dolores Huerta? Sahana?
She'd be an expert in farm worker conditions, but she wouldn't be an expert in teaching math, for example.
Oh, okay, that's good. So Dolores Huerta, because at least one person hadn't heard of her before. Dolores Huerta was, she's still alive, I believe. She's quite old. She's like well into her 90s at this point, if I remember correctly. Lives in Fresno. She, along with Cesar Chavez, was sort of one of the founders of the United Farm Workers, the Farm Workers Union, led stuff like the big march from Delano to Sacramento in like the 70s to try to get, I think that was specifically for like table grape farm workers to get a raise on sort of the raisins that they picked, kind of thing. Yeah, so Dolores Huerta, expert in farm worker conditions. She went to college and actually became a teacher, so she might actually have some expertise in math. But I think we could come up with another example of something Dolores Huerta is probably not an expert in. Dominic, do you have something?
I'm an expert mechanic.
Let's say specifically electric car design and repair. Seems a very safe bet that Dolores Huerta is not the person you want to talk to if your Volt is having battery issues. Okay. How about some of the personal ones, like the oldest and the youngest member of your family? What did people say there? Sheree, do you have something?
Like my older sibling,
Okay.
I would say the expert in being authoritative.
So your older sibling is an expert in what?
Like being authoritative, like if you said it once, then like you just kind of have to go along with it.
Okay, so like authoritative in the sense of bossy?
Yeah.
Okay. An expert in being bossy, maybe getting other people to do things and getting their way. And that's something they are an expert in, right? Okay. Other answers for other members of your families? Sahana?
How to be a parent.
How to be a parent? Yeah. You all might not appreciate how hard it is to like do the time management and also like the emotional labor of parenting kind of children of all ages. Yeah, that is definitely something that requires a degree of expertise. I forget who, but somebody over there mentioned like sort of being a housewife and was sort of saying, it's like, I think it was their grandmother, doesn't seem like she has any expertise because she was a housewife, but like knowing how to get certain stains out of clothes, knowing how to do certain kinds of cleaning, knowing how to efficiently prepare a meal for a large number of people, like those are pretty complicated skills. There actually used to be a discipline called home economics. This was like a legitimate academic scholarly discipline that was killed for various reasons in the 1980s, but it was all about like how to kind of maintain a home as efficiently as possible in a bunch of different senses. Just to fill this in for the members of my family, the oldest member of my family is my dad, who actually is, the slide needs to be updated. He's now 73. Is he 70? No, he's 72. Birthday's in July. He is an expert in so he and his wife, for several years, spent every winter in Mexico on their sailboat. He made a lot of money in his career. And so he knows everyone in this network of about 200 people, all Americans who come down to this little cove in tropical Mexico for some part of the year. Like, he knows everything about all of these people. On the other hand, he knows nothing about social media. Like, barely understands how to use Facebook because he's 72. And he spends most of his time living on a boat with limited internet connectivity. The youngest member of my family is less than a year old, so we're going to bracket him. The second youngest member of my family is my niece, who is 6. She is an expert in Sonic and Frozen. She knows so much about like Sonic lore. She knows all of the characters. Apparently there are a bunch of Sonic movies I didn't know exist. Because when I was growing up, Sonic was just a video game character. You know, she knows everything about Sonic lore and also about Frozen lore. If you have a question about the Frozen franchise, my 6-year-old niece can answer it for you. She's not an expert in logic. She's 6, that's not her strong suit yet. And then how about you? What did you say you're an expert in? Let's see, table 9 has been quiet. Somebody at table 9, what did you say you were an expert in? Alexa, do you have something? Yeah. Volleyball? Cool. Other folks? What are you an expert in? Duncan?
I have a handful of top 100 world records for ultra kill speedruns, but that's,
Speed running?
yeah, there you go.
Okay. There's somebody, I heard a noise from over here.
No, sorry, I just recognized the game.
How about the social network at your school? Maybe it was your high school, maybe it's here, depending on like what year you are. And you have expertise in that? Dalen?
Yeah, I can say that.
Okay. The best place to get ice cream in your hometown. Freddie doesn't like ice cream.
I know, I like ice cream. It's just I don't know any places in which they.
Oh, okay. Okay. So the upshot here is that expertise depends on the topic. We might go to you if we want to know where is the best place to get ice cream in your hometown. Or maybe if the ice cream options aren't super great in your hometown, maybe it's like, where is the best place to get pizza or Thai food or wherever. If that's what we want to know, we might go to you. We probably wouldn't go to Anthony Fauci. On the other hand, if we wanted to know how to run a government health agency, we probably would go to Anthony Fauci and probably not you. I don't think any of you are public health majors. Or if we wanted to run a really influential podcast, we would go to Joe Rogan. Even someone we don't normally regard as an expert, Joe Rogan, can still be considered an expert in certain areas. But we have to be thoughtful because he's definitely not an expert in how to respond to a global pandemic. So expertise depends on the topic. Expertise is not something that like this person has, and so we should listen to them on everything. This is a common way that, for example, scientists are represented in fiction, where like the scientist knows physics, but also genetics, but also how to fix the computers. Realistically, that's 3 different areas of expertise that 3 different people would have. So when we think about expertise and we make an appeal to expertise, it needs to be relevant to the topic of the claim at hand, which I believe is the next slide here. Not quite. Now, when you first started these conversations about who is an expert, what I heard several of you say, and what I've heard many times in teaching this unit, is that an expert is someone basically who has formal training or education in a field. So something like Anthony Fauci has a degree in immunology. I have a PhD in philosophy. So Fauci and we have credentials that establish our expertise in the fields of immunology, in his case, philosophy in mine. This is credentialed expertise. This is expertise based on having a credential that indicates you have formal training or education in the field. Oakley, is that a question or a stretch?
Stretch.
Okay. In our examples, we have people who had jobs, presumably based on their credentials. A job as an archaeologist, a job as a botanist or plant biologist. Their job, presumably based on their credentials and accomplishments in the area. Okay? Similarly with Anthony Fauci, you probably don't get to be head of the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases without having relevant credentials to that area, or being a professor. You don't get to be a professor of philosophy without having a formal credential in philosophy. So credentialed expertise is what we often think about when we think about what expertise is or who counts as an expert. But a lot of the examples we had here are not based on credentials. Joe Rogan does not have a degree in podcasting. Dolores Huerta did not become an expert in farm worker working conditions by studying that in school. She has a credential, but it's in teaching, not sociology or some other aspect of labor. So this sort of expertise we call experiential expertise, people who have substantial life experience in a field. So Joe Rogan's expertise in podcasting comes from his experience creating this very successful podcast. Successful in the sense of like getting lots of listeners. Dolores Huerta, her experience came from working with farm workers, organizing them, understanding the issues that they faced, and advocating for them. So experiential expertise is the expertise that we get based on substantial life experience in a field. This is the same expertise you have about like the best places to get ice cream in your hometown, or your expertise in sort of the dynamics of your friend group. This is experiential expertise. So we have credentialed expertise and experiential expertise. These are both legitimate sources of expertise. And when we encounter an appeal to authority, it's good to stop and think about what kind of expertise this is. So far, the examples we've had of experiential expertise have been sort of things outside of what we normally think of as formal academic topics. Okay, so we have Joe Rogan and podcasting, we have you and the best place to get ice cream, we have Dolores Huerta and the farm workers. These are areas that we don't think of as you can get a credential in these things anyways. You can't get a credential in like the restaurants in your hometown. But experiential expertise can even extend to what we think of as scientific topics. So there weren't a lot of people, to put it mildly, at the screening of How to Survive a Plague Monday night. That documentary, which again I highly recommend, it's fantastic, one of my favorite films. It's a documentary about HIV/AIDS activists, primarily in New York, in the 1980s and 90s. One of the cool things about this group is that a bunch of people, in a few cases, basically no higher education whatsoever, or education in areas that weren't directly related to science, became experts in areas like research study design, trial design, drug policy, the immunology of HIV/AIDS. Highly marginalized population of queer folks, often living in poverty, in the 80s and 90s, highly stigmatized, organized themselves, educated themselves, and were able to change the way drug policy works in the United States. So these are experiential experts. They're not getting a credential in these topics. But based on their experience and working together, educating themselves, they're able to challenge the scientific mainstream, sometimes giving very technical critiques. The other example here is the environmental justice movement. The environmental justice movement is not like one thing. It's primarily local, community, sometimes regional scale movements to address environmental forms of discrimination. So for example, local forms of pollution, air quality in the San Joaquin Valley, where pesticide is used in the San Joaquin Valley, access to clean water, things like this. There's both a class and a racial aspect to environmental injustice. And environmental justice communities are, like with ACT UP and HIV/AIDS, environmental justice communities are often highly impoverished communities of color, very little access to formal education. You can basically think of farm workers who, in some cases, have been able to organize themselves, educate themselves on the environmental issues in their community, and offer not just political critiques, but also technical scientific critiques of, for example, the way air quality measurements are made, or the way pesticide safety testing is conducted. This is another example of experiential expertise developed in the context of science, what we would normally think of as a credentialed field. Questions or comments on sort of the scope of experiential expertise? I will say, if you're interested in learning more about environmental justice, There are a few different classes in various departments that talk about it. I, in particular, teach a philosophy class, Philosophy 116, called Environmental Philosophy and Politics, where we talk about environmental justice as one of the units in that class. Okay. So we have enough kind of tools in place that we can start to think about how to put an appeal to expertise in premise conclusion form. As a first pass, we might just say something like this. According to Anthony Fauci, you should wear a mask to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Therefore, you should wear a mask to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Or, according to Joe Rogan, masks aren't effective. Therefore, you shouldn't wear a mask. What's missing in this first pass version of putting an appeal to expertise in premise conclusion form? Think about plugging in Anthony Fauci, thinking about plugging in Joe Rogan. Let's actually have everybody think about that for a few seconds. What's missing when we just have the name of the expert or the purported expert and the claim that they make? Okay, what is missing in this first pass version? Sahana?
It's missing an assessment of expertise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we want to build in some of the tools we've identified already. One of those tools is thinking about what area the expertise is, what areas are relevant to the topic and what areas does the expert actually have expertise in. So that's what the second pass does. Rather than just saying, according to Joe Rogan, masks don't work or whatever. In the first premise, we want to think about what area of expertise does this person actually have? And is that relevant to the question at hand? So if we had, for example, Joe Rogan is an expert in podcasting, expertise in podcasting is relevant to the effectiveness of masks for spreading COVID-19, well, that premise, too, is not going to work. Right? Expertise in podcasting is not relevant to whether or not masks are effective in preventing the spread of COVID-19. Questions or comments on that? It's abstract, and I'm not filling in the slides, but we're going to have a concrete example in just a second. Okay. So let's go back to the example of humans using tobacco at least 12,000 years ago. This I just copied and pasted from my slide, so it's the same information. We have Darren Duke, their principal and CEO at Far Western Anthropological Research Group, and so on. Okay, so we have this structure so far. X is an expert in area A. Expertise in A is relevant to Y, according to X, Y, therefore Y. How do I plug this in? How do I fill this in? Ayush?
Darren Duke is an expert
Mm-hmm.
in archaeology.
So Darren Duke is an expert in archaeology. And then I can just plug archaeology in here. And Darren Duke's name here. So Darren Duke is an expert in archaeology. Expertise in archaeology is relevant to why? Some claim that's being made. According to Darren Duke, why? Therefore, why? So I need to plug in why. Yeah. A little louder?
I guess it could be the historical use of tobacco.
Yeah, we want something that can stand alone as a sentence, right? And the historical use of tobacco isn't a sentence. That's on the right track. I'll give you a hint. It's on the slide. Sahana.
Humans have been using
Yeah.
tobacco for a long time.
I'm just going to copy and paste the headline. Not so large, though. Humans were using tobacco at least 12,000 years ago. Copy and paste there. And copy and paste there. Premise 1, Darren Duke is an expert in archaeology. Premise 2, expertise in archaeology is relevant to whether humans were using tobacco at least 12,000 years ago. According to Darren Duke, humans were using tobacco at least 12,000 years ago. Therefore, humans were using tobacco at least 12,000 years ago. Okay, a little repetitive, but we've broken this down now into it's not just according to Darren Duke, humans were using tobacco at least 12,000 years ago, and therefore we should accept that because Darren Duke said so. Why should we accept something because Darren Duke said so? Well, because Darren Duke is an expert specifically in archaeology, and this expertise is relevant to the claim. Questions or comments? Clear enough so far? Okay. Good. So that's rule 2. Rule 3 is that expertise must also be responsive. And let me think, how much of this? I've got 7 minutes. Okay, yeah, I can do this. This is just me talking. Sorry, it's just me talking, but we can get through this, introduce the thing, and then we come back to this some more next Tuesday. So this unit is about trust. And specifically, it's about trustworthiness, which is whether or not trust is appropriate. When we are dependent on someone epistemically, we are trusting them to know things on our behalf. So we're trusting Darren Duke to know things about human use of tobacco on our behalf, or we're trusting Anthony Fauci to know things about COVID-19 on our behalf. So on this slide, I'm drawing on work in philosophy on what it takes to be trustworthy, what it takes for trust to be appropriate. I'm illustrating this with a story about a bad cat sitter. So when I travel, which is several times a year, I usually have to leave the cats at home, and so I get a sitter to come in and take care of them, scoop their litter box, make sure they have food and water, give them a little attention, especially because Jasper is kind of needy about that. But one time I was gone for a week, other side of the country, I was in Pittsburgh. I stopped getting updates from my cat sitter. Like halfway through the trip, I got home. They were totally out of food. They were totally out of water. And the litter box clearly hadn't been scooped for like 3 days. And they completely ghosted me. I never heard back from that cat sitter again. And this was upsetting because I don't have kids, I have cats. I really love my cats. And if I had been, if they had flaked earlier or I had been gone longer, who knows what could have happened to them. Placing trust in someone makes you vulnerable. When I place my trust in the cat sitter, I'm vulnerable because the cats are vulnerable. this trust can be appropriate or inappropriate. It was inappropriate for me to trust this flaky cat sitter. Trustworthiness depends on competence, which is knowing how to do appropriate things or having appropriate knowledge. So Anthony Fauci is competent as an immunologist. But trustworthiness also depends on responsiveness. So this cat sitter knew how to scoop out the litter, knew how to give Jasper's anti-anxiety pill, knew how to get into the house, and so on. This cat sitter was competent, but they weren't responsive. They, rather than kind of taking seriously the vulnerability of the cats and I, they just kind of flaked out or something. The other example I used up here is, say the cat sitter showed up and Jag was injured or sick. A responsive, responsible cat sitter wouldn't like email me and wait for me to reply. A responsive cat sitter would be like, I need to take this cat to the vet right now. This is an emergency. He goes in the carrier and he goes to the nearest vet. So a good cat sitter is not just competent, but also responsive. Similarly, a good expert is not just competent, but responsive to the people who are they are vulnerable to. We got 3 minutes. Okay. So rather than moving on, I'm just going to note here. So when we think about the trustworthiness of an expert, we've already talked about competence. We also have to consider, are they responsive, and who are they responsive to? Who is vulnerable based on this expert's expertise, and are they appropriately responsive to the concerns and interests of that vulnerable person? We'll leave that there for today. Recap that quickly on Tuesday. Something I need to highlight for next week. There is an assignment I added to CAT courses the other day that I need you to do before class next Thursday. So on Tuesday, we should be wrapping up this, sort of the bulk of this unit on expertise. And next Thursday, we're going to be discussing the results of this assignment. So in this little assignment, you are going to be fact-checking ChatGPT or some other LLM. You're going to have it generate a paper that includes citations, and you're going to see, do those citations actually exist? Do they support the claims that are being made? This is one where you have to use an LLM, but it's like the only other time in this class where you have to use an LLM. You do not need an account to access it. It'll take you a little bit of time, but I think only an hour, 75 minutes, maybe 90 minutes at the most. So it's not a super long time. And then there's an essay that's like 3,500 words long that I want you to read. And this is before class on Thursday. So it's okay if you don't get to it before Tuesday, but you need to do it before Thursday. Duncan, did you have a question?
It was more so just elaboration on how does this work if you don't have an account?
Yeah, you don't need an account to use ChatGPT at this point. Yeah. Yeah, that has changed. Yeah. Yeah, detailed instructions in there, which I won't go over. One step is a little bit involved, so I actually have a kind of video walking through how to do it. That's also the longest and most involved step, so check out that video as well. Any final questions for today? Okay, very good. Very good work this week. Have a great rest of your Thursday. Come to discussion. I think Polyphony and I have no idea what's going to happen in discussion tomorrow, but it will have something to do with trust and expertise. Come to our AI discussion tomorrow afternoon, and then have a great weekend.